Well, I trust Unit 1 was not too much of a challenge for you. I hope it was a challenge actually for you. We're now moving into Unit 3, where you have divided the Old Testament according to the Hebrew Bible. They have the Pentateuch, and then they have what is known as the prophets. And of course, they divide them into the former prophets and the latter prophets, mainly because the books of these books were basically written by prophets, as best as we can tell. We're going to deal with the former prophets in Unit 2. We're dealing with the book of Joshua, and it takes us through the book of Kings, which develops, of course, the conquest of Jerusalem and the people taken into exile back into Babylon. Joshua, as you know, is a very dynamic book. It's a very significant book as it establishes the people in their land. What we have here is the development, of course, of the state of Israel, or nation, I should say, the nation of Israel. Basically, you can't have a nation unless you have three significant qualities. Obviously, you need people, right? We saw that with Abraham. Second, you need a land, right? That's the conquest. You can't have a nation without land. And so the conquest brings Israel into the land of Canaan, does it not? The third thing that you need to keep a people together is language. You know that? Language. And of course, during this time, the Hebrew language is being developed. Keep in mind, did they speak Hebrew in Egypt? I don't think so. And so during this time period, in fact, I think you'll be amazed as where actually the Hebrew language comes from. So look very carefully. And as it's developed during this time period, and so that by the time you get into the 10th century, the time of the United Monarchy, we believe Hebrew is in the works, if not one of the dominant languages of the people of Israel. And of course, after the Joshua and the Judges, that brings us into the books of Samuel and Kings, which we call the United Monarchy period, where you'll see introduced, of course, to David and Solomon. Solomon, of course, leads the people to fall and brings us into the latter part of the book of Kings and the divided monarchy and eventually the captivity. I want you to look very carefully, though, at the last chapter of the book of Kings, chapter 25, the last several verses. It's very important, I think, theologically what's going on here, because if you notice, the last individual mentioned in the book of Kings is one of the last kings of Israel. You're thinking, why is he mentioned here? He's actually elevated to a status within the reign of the Babylonian Empire. Why? Well, I think the key here is because he's of the line of David, and they're in exile. They're thinking maybe God has abandoned them, but the last word that God talks about is the elevation of one of their kings, saying, hey, the line of David is still alive. Remember what I promised to him back in 2 Samuel chapter 6. An everlasting kingdom is still here, even in this dire circumstances that they're in Babylon. So that's the former prophets, Unit 2. And so I trust you enjoy the lesson.